Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Mindful Monday session today. My name is Faye Mclaughlin, and I am the Inclusion Manager here at Regent International School. Today, our Mindful Monday session is going to be all about how we are able to support our English language learners at home. So during the session today, we're going to talk about some top tips on how to do that, some ideas for activities or games that you might be able to play at home. And we'll have an opportunity for some questions later on in the session where I will be joined by our English language learner teacher. So, first of all, we need to think about why developing English language away from the school setting is important. And one of the reasons for that is you, the people at home, the people who are supporting our children away from school. There are many studies that show that parental educational engagement has a huge impact, a positive impact on the progress and skills that our children develop. In addition to that, it is also a consistent and excellent opportunity to reinforce the language that is acquired in school and to accelerate the progress of the language acquisition that your children have as non-native English speakers. So, now that we have understood why creating these language-rich experiences are important, we're going to look at some tips to help you do that. So the first one is to speak English as often as possible. Now, in a range of contexts, in small bite-sized opportunities is often the best way to do this. That means that we are exposing our children to this language in small snippets, which means they're probably going to be able to retain the skills and words that they're listening to more efficiently. Our second tip is about using appropriate media. Now, we are a technological world, especially at the moment. Our children are on screens or in front of screens a lot. And so making sure that what they're accessing is supporting their language development is really important. Things such as movies, TV programs, cartoons, or even listening to podcasts or watching podcasts can be really helpful ways to develop English language at home. The third thing that we would look at is connecting with native speakers as often as possible. Now, I am aware that in the current context of the global climate that we're in, immersing ourselves with lots of different people is difficult. However, there are some safe opportunities that you can engage in, such as maybe after-school clubs with limited numbers, play dates with families who you connect with often, or even using online platforms that we've become so familiar with over the past 12 months, such as Zoom, quizzes, or reading together in a group online can be really beneficial ways to engage with native speakers. Tip number 4 is about making time. It's so important that you don't wait for the opportunity to practice English to come to you. Even if it is little and often, setting time aside in your day or your week will make a huge impact if it is prioritized. So your English language skills become part of your week, both in school and outside of school. The next tip is one that may feel quite alien to a lot of people, but is so beneficial for children who are in the very early stages of their language development, which is for you as the adult to become the narrator. What we're asking you to do when we speak about this skill or this tip is for you to say out loud everything that you are doing and labeling the things in the environment around you. So, for example, If you were brushing your teeth with your child of a morning, what you will be doing is labeling the things in the environment around you: your toothbrush, your toothpaste, the tap, the water, the sink. And you would also be enforcing an understanding of the verbs, the actions that you are doing, brushing, and making sure that the children understand what exactly you're doing when you say the word, rinsing the mouth so they know exactly the action that goes along with the word that they're learning. And this provides more meaningful contexts for the children to understand the language. It can also be done when driving down the road, to play games such as I Spy, to see if they can see the things in the environment around them. That is a really crucial one. The next is imaginative play. This is a really great low pressure method to develop children's English skills. When children are engaged in imaginative play, whether it be with toys, dolls, their peers, it reduces the pressure on them to need to have the right thing to say, but in turn is a great way to encourage conversational skills between the toys that they're playing with or between them and their friend, when there's less intensity on them making sure they say exactly the right thing to the person that's listening to them. The next that we would always look to achieve is setting high expectations. So when you are finding these little pockets of time to practice English language at home, it's important that every time you come to this opportunity, that you do so with a high expectation. What we mean by this is, when communicating, ensure that you communicate complete ideas to your child and you expect the same back from them. So for example, if your child at home wanted to ask you for a piece of fruit from the kitchen, instead of just naming the piece of fruit, for example, apple or orange, as an indicator that that's what they would like, we would try to encourage them to use a full sentence. Can I have an apple, please? Or I would like an apple. And in that instance, if they are using small phrases or single word demands to communicate their needs in English, we would encourage you to ask a question back to them. What would you like? Did you want an apple? And encourage them to give you a full sentence as a response. Just small opportunities such as that can have a huge impact in the way that language is developed at home. The next thing that we would ask you to do is trust your gut. Don't be afraid to correct your child at home. If you feel as though something that they have said to you does not quite sit right, then don't be afraid to, in a supportive way, correct what they have said to you. If you feel that something doesn't sound right, it likely is not correct. So a technique that you could use in this instance could be to write down what it is you are trying to communicate. Leave it for 5 minutes and come back to it. Often, with the gap in time, our brain is able to reprogram and identify where the error is. And that way, we can correct the error that has been made. After that, if you're still unsure as to how to correct the error or to find the solution to the problem that you have, the next thing that we would encourage you to do is to use your guessing powers. Nobody knows the exact meaning of every word, even in their native languages. And so, in the same way that we would encourage native speakers to use the clues in the text around them or in the environment around them, we would encourage you to do the same with your language learners at home. If, for example, you are watching something on TV and you don't quite understand what has been said, or you're reading something in a book and you don't quite understand the meaning behind the word, we would encourage you to do a few things with your children. First of all, look around the thing that you're struggling with. Is there anything in the text, in the images in the book, or on the screen that would help you to unpick what it is that you're struggling with? And when you're coming across words or you're hearing things, does it sound like or look like another word that you know? Within the English language, many words come from one root word. And this means that a lot of words that have the same type of meaning look similar as well. For example, the word fearful, fearsome, afraid, they all have a similar letter pattern and similar root words that will be able to help you unpick what exactly the word is that you are trying to understand. The final thing that we would encourage you to do as a top tip to help your English language learners at home is to read. Read as often as you can, read out loud, read in the bathroom, read in the car, read in the kitchen. Wherever you can, encourage your children to read. And when you are reading, we would really encourage you to ask questions about the information that your child is reading. So now that we have identified the different ways that we can support our language learners at home, we're going to spend just a couple of moments talking about ways that we can bring these ideas to life and practical approaches that you can use at home. So with regard to the reading, there are 3 types of questions that are really beneficial for our language learners at home. Who questions, what questions, and where questions. If you're not confident with reading at home, which can often be the case in households of English language speakers, there are many great resources that you can lean upon to help you with this. So you may want to use websites such as Epic Reads, which the children have access to here in school. Additionally, there are videos on YouTube that will read the stories aloud to you, and you can ask the questions from what is being read. Now, I know that Miss Fleming, who is our English language learner teacher, has many websites that we can share with you as a resource for you to use to help with this particular aspect, which we'll be able to send out to you as participants of our Mindful Monday. The next thing is around the media outlets that we spoke about earlier on. We spoke about using appropriate movies or TV programs and cartoons to help support your children. And a great way to add depth to these media outlets is using the subtitles. Now, you may want to use subtitles as the English audio and native subtitles, or you might want to use the native audio and English subtitles, depending on where your skill set is at. And using this to both listen and read at the same time is quite demanding, but is an excellent learning opportunity for you to hear the word in your native language, as well as either seeing it or hearing it in English as well. This can also be really helpful for the order in which words are placed in a sentence. Not all languages place words in the same order as we do in English. And so that can be a really helpful tip for the children as well. The next are some activities that you can use for bringing your children away from the screen. So guessing games can be a really great tool. So you might want to share a picture or have items from around your house. For example, if you have a pet, you might want to ask things like, is this an animal or a vegetable? Is it a dog or a cat? Simple yes and no answers to provide meaning to the words that you're asking the questions about can have a real powerful impact. Additionally, there are some games that you can get where you have a headband on and a picture on the front of your headband, and you have to ask questions to the people that you're playing the game with about what is the image on the card. I know that we have access to this game in school, and it could probably be something that could be made with post-it notes at home, quite simply. And just asking those questions and developing that language in the questions and the understanding behind them can be really powerful and a very fun way to encourage language at home. In instances where we are stuck and unable to use the clues around us, we're not able to identify words that look similar, we have to rely on something to help us. And so teaching our children how to use Google Translate or something of that nature can have a real positive impact and can be a quick win when children feel stuck or unsure about the language they're either listening to or trying to communicate to other people. Another top tip about how to bring these ideas to life is to make them manageable and focus on small groups of words at a time. So, for example, you may want to choose 5 key words a week or a key topic to focus on in the week. You might want to focus on items you find in the kitchen and things that you might do with them. You could then use this to go to the supermarket and you could ask your child, can you find me a whisk or a pan? Or you might want to make it a bit more complex. Can you find me something that I would mix with? Or can you find me something that I would heat something with? And allow them to explore language in context just outside of their home, but that they can use within their home as well. The next thing, which is really beneficial and something that I believe is quite unique to Dubai, is the idea of using board games. Now, not everybody has a wealth of board games at home anymore. I don't believe that they're used very often. However, in Dubai, we have a great selection of board game cafes that you can go to. And in these places, there are many different games that you can play that require minimal or a lot of English language, or a lot of language, shall we say, to play them. And you can use these as a great opportunity to develop your English language with them. You can use ones that require minimal language input if you're not as confident in developing your skills. And if you are, use one that requires a lot more language to play the game. Finally, our next tip is about online games. There is such a wealth of activities online that will be able to help both you and your child develop your English language skills. We have a range of websites that we can suggest to you to use, which we can send out again after our session. And this will help you and the people in your home to develop these language skills in a very fun and practical way. Now, we are on to the questions section of our Mindful Monday, and I'm going to be joined by Miss Georgia Fleming, who is our English language learner teacher. Hi, Georgia. Oh, you're just on mute there, Georgia.
Apologies for that, technical problems. It's lovely to join you. I'll be happy to answer any questions that have come in for our Mindful Monday session on how to support English language learners at home. So.
Perfect, thank you. So I'll just start off with one that we've had through, and then you can go next with one that you've received. Okay, so the first one that we had was around how can we improve reading comprehension skills for English language learners with additional needs? And this is a really important question. And I know that this can often seem as though we're tackling two problems at once. But my advice for that would be to take things slowly and to read small amounts of text or information followed by questions quite quickly after you've read them. So we wouldn't encourage you to perhaps read an entire book before asking some of those key who, what, where questions that we spoke about earlier. Make it manageable and in small chunks, and this should help you to develop both processing of the and understanding of the question and information, as well as developing those language skills. I hope that helps. Over to you, Georgia.
Yes, we had an interesting question. The question was, is watching cartoons the same as reading a book? It is not, because you're practicing different skills, essentially. One practices your listening skills more, while reading will practice your listening skills as well as your reading skills. They are, to a certain extent, interchangeable, but I would say that both are really useful, provided that what you're using as a resource, for example, the type of cartoon that you're choosing, has good structured language. So especially for younger ages, there's a lot of things such as, for example, Peppa Pig, Ben and Holly, which have really, really good simple sentences and a lot of visuals to help English language learners with. And as far as reading a book, I think Faye already has mentioned Epic, which is an application that we already use in school. And, you know, as a different option to reading with your child at home, you could use Epic at the times perhaps when you don't have a lot of time to invest, or if you're not a very confident reader yourself, in having a book read out to them and for them to be able to listen to the story and literally see the word being highlighted as the story goes along.
Thank you, Georgia. And that's really helpful for developing confidence of everybody at home, as you mentioned. There were quite a few questions with regards to how do we support our English language learners with their attention and listening skills. Now, this is a whole other realm of support, and actually we're very lucky that just a few weeks ago Dr. Sumner held a Mindful Monday session on developing our attention and listening skills for our children, which is also available on our Facebook page for you to revisit. And a key message that is communicated within that session is that our attention and listening skills we are not born with them. They, like a muscle in the gym, they are something that have to be exercised. We need to practice the skill to build our ability with it. So if you were to touch base with that Mindful Monday session, you will be able to pick up a few really useful tips that you can implement in these sessions that you're timetabling at home, or within everyday activities. You know, it's important that we develop attention and listening not only when we're practicing English language at home, but when we're practicing everything at home and developing those skills. So I would definitely advise anybody that's struggling with that to revisit that Mindful Monday session, and remember that it's not something that can be taught instantly. It's a process that needs to be built upon over time. Okay.
Okay. So another question that I had was around native language use at home. So a lot of people, and especially because we're in such a multicultural place, would have mentioned that, you know, our native language is what we prefer to speak at home because we do want our children to speak it confidently as well. So how do we balance that with teaching them English? I think the point that you made earlier, Faye, around doing little and often is very, very important. And I guess there is a balance, as with everything. And how much time you want to spend would really depend on where your learner is on their journey to learning English and how basic their skills are. Just because you're sacrificing a bit of your native language now doesn't necessarily mean it's always going to be the case. So you might be at the very, very beginning of your journey. You've just arrived in Dubai and you want to help bring up those skills now. So therefore you would invest more time and then fall back into having a smaller, more regular intervals when you're doing some interventions. And as I said, it is a personal choice as well. If for whatever reason you feel that it is really, really important to have the native language spoken solely at home, then perhaps you can allow time and supervise when the child is spending time doing additional English activities that perhaps you're not involved in because you don't want the child to associate you with the use of the English language. And very similar to that, sorry, Faye, I'll continue because there was a second or a different question in very similar vein or very similar thread, which was because we speak English as a foreign language ourselves, it sometimes is difficult to support children at home. It's difficult to teach someone when you yourself are not confident in what you're teaching. And I do very much appreciate that. I think how much time you invest and the types of activities you choose really does depend on how confident you yourself are. If you're very confident, playing the games, doing all the fun things, going to the games cafe are great. If your English is very, very limited and you're thinking, I'm going to hinder this process rather than help the child learn better English, then fall back on the things that we are suggesting that you can use without your input. So fall back on things like Epic, where the child is being read to, fall back into them watching a little bit more cartoons, fall back into doing some of the suggested games that we will send you links for that are sort of age appropriate for children. And, everyone cannot do everything. It is not your job to teach English at home, but the more you can assist the process, the better it will be for your child. So you're not taking on the responsibility instead of us, you're just adding to what we're already doing here. And you should do however much you feel confident in doing.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Georgia. We also had a few questions about developing phonics. So phonics is not necessarily something that falls within the regular pattern of language learners. I know you and I spoke yesterday, Georgia, about quite often our language learners pick up new language through sight reading and just knowing that that is what that word says. However, especially lower down the school, which is where the families asking these questions were coming from, phonics is something that is practiced from FS1 all the way up to year 1 and year 2 when required. And it's not just an issue with language learners where phonics is concerned. So what I suppose I'm trying to say is please don't worry if there are certain sounds or blending skills that your child has not picked up on just yet. They come over time with lots of practice. Some sounds within the English language require our mouth to form the sound in a particular way. And sometimes children need extra practice for their mouths to be able to make that sound. So for that, we provide additional support in class. We also have a wonderful group of learning support practitioners who support our different year groups, as well as our individual needs support assistants who provide additional phonics support for our children with high levels of additional need. So where the phonics issues are, or where you see that there may be phonics issues, please do reach out to your child's class teacher. They may be able to suggest some activities around the sounds that they're working on. There are lots of phonics games online that are very helpful, very fun, very colourful and stimulating for the children to use. But I wouldn't worry too much about certain phonics sounds not being mastered, especially within FS2 and Year 1 just yet. The children are still on their learning journey with that. Did you have any other questions that you had been asked, Georgia?
I think there was an interesting question, which was around kids being clever enough to know that something is educational, and how do you encourage them to use that? You can't, of course, force them, but you can give them an incentive. So even a little star chart that says I've completed something, and you get a little star, and then at the end of it you can choose the movie that everyone is watching on the Friday. So try and incentivize them as much as you can. Yes, they are clever and they will figure out that you're trying to teach them something and it's not pure fun. But, you can find things that are fun for them because each child is different. If not, try and incentivize them. And it doesn't mean you have to be incentivizing with big things, just the recognition that you've achieved this and you've finished this with a sticker, or as I said, with a choice of something, making the decision of what we're going to have for dinner. They can be enough of an incentive for young children who many times don't make these decisions.
Yeah, and that kind of echoes the last question that was asked for me as well, around how do we convince our children to do this work at home when they have been in school all day. And I suppose your advice with regards to that question can be a really helpful tool in that capacity. And also, as we have echoed earlier on today, short, regular bursts of these activities are the most beneficial. Making them as fun as they can be is really important. But also remember, as Georgia mentioned earlier on, you are their family. You are not their sole teacher. And so remembering that your interaction at home is coming from a parent or family member relationship and not teacher pupil, which can have a different dynamic to it, and children know that. So be sensitive to the relationships that you have at home. Don't aggravate those instances where you get into shouting matches with your children to try and force them to do something. Try and make it as authentic and fun as possible so that the learning that comes after it is purposeful and useful and is retained. Okay, so I think that wraps up the questions that we were asked. I hope that this has been useful for everybody. And if you do have any further questions that you think of later on, please don't hesitate to get in touch with either Georgia or myself, and we'll be happy to answer those for you. Okay, so thank you very much for your time this morning, Georgia, and thank you to everybody that's joined us. And we will see you later on in the week. Thank you.
Everyone, bye-bye.
Bye.